Hello everyone, and welcome to this audio podcast. In this as part of this series, the analysis edition. This audio podcast as part of a manuscript Cyclone. This audio podcast aligned to another Bostic summit, and this audio podcast allied to another Storm Bostics production. And in this overview, as part of this audio podcast, and as part of the overview in this audio podcast, um, and there will be a sort of a look at sort of the works from from works almost from the archives, if you like. And this is an audio podcast that will look at in sort of the history the history of medicine in context of a physician, a surgeon, and a poet, and someone a a faith perspective, looking at the life of someone who's known as Ibn Zuhr, who was a physician, a surgeon, and a poet from the year 1094 and to 1162, and this this works was originally sort of works that was presented at the British Islamic Medical Association National Conference in 2017. And so I thought I'd take the opportunity to provide a basis in around the life of Ibn Zuhr, from this perspective. And so in the history of medicine, Islamic medicine, also known as Arabic medicine, refers to the science of medicine developed in the Golden Age, in the Islamic Golden Age, and written originally in Arabic, the lingua franca of Islamic civilization. And beginning in the 7th century, Islam spread to a large part of the known world, and under the rule of Islamic caliphs, people of various ethnic origins and religious beliefs lived together. And the common language of the communication was Arabic, and the culture that was that was cultivated was known or referred to as the Islamic culture, even if it included, for example, Muslims, Jews, Christians, and other religions alike under the rule of Islam. And the Islamic medicine has faithfully preserved us and systemized and further developed the medical knowledge of classical antiquity, and during the classical Islamic medicine was perhaps one of the most advanced in the world, integrating concepts of the ancient Greek, Roman, Persian, as well as ancient Indian tradition, or Indian traditions. At the same time, the knowledge of classical medicine was nearly lost to the medieval medicine of Western Europe, only to be regained by European physicians when they became familiar with Islamic medical authors during the Renaissance of the 12th century. The medieval Islamic physicians largely retained authority until the rise of medicine as part of the natural sciences, and beginning with the age of Enlightenment, nearly 600 years after the textbooks textbooks were written. Many aspects of retrospective writings are important today, and the contribution has been or is held in high regard by many physicians today. So, in context of physicians in the early years of the faith in context of Islam, so Arabian physicians became familiar with Greco-Roman and late Hellenistic medicine through by practicing in the newly conquered regions rather than by reading original or translated works. The translation emerging Islamic text to Damascus may have facilitated this contact, as Syrian medicine was part of that ancient tradition. The names of two Christian physicians were known at the time. Number one, Ibn Atal, who worked at the court of Muawiyah and the founder of the Umayyad dynasty, and two, Abu Hakam, who was responsible for the preparation of drugs, was employed by Muawiyah. Abu Hakam's son or grandson and great grandson were also serving the Umayyad and Abbasid Caliphate. So in around medicine and surgery in context of early Islam as well. So the development and growth of hospitals in ancient Islamic society expanded the medical practice to what is currently known as surgery. Surgical procedures were known to physicians during the medieval period because of early text and included the descriptions of the procedures. Translation from from pre-Islamic medical publishings of was a fundamental building was a fundamental building block for physicians and surgeons in order to expand the practice. Surgery was uncommonly practiced by physicians and other medical affiliates due to very low success rate, even though early records provided favorable outcomes to certain operations. The Western Caliphate produced physicians and philosophers almost as brilliant as those of the East. Remarkable schools of medicine were founded at Seville, Toledo, and Cordova, and the most famous of the professors were Ibn Rushd or Averroes, Al-Zawari or Abu Qasais, and Ibn Zuhr or Ibn Zuhr. So the biography, in around the biography of Ibn Zuhr, Ibn Zuhr was a Muslim physician, a surgeon, and a poet. Ibn Zuhr, Ibn Zuhr being his Latin name was not as sort of not as widely known in sort of current surgical literature as predecessors. For example, Al-Razi, who was around between sort of the century 854 to 925, and Ibn Sina or Avicenna between 980 and 1037, and also al-Zawari or Abu Qasais between 930 and 1013. Ibn Zuhr was born in Seville, and belonged to the Banu Zuhr family of Arab origin, which produced six consecutive generations of physicians and included jurists, poets, viziers, or courtiers, and midwives who served under the rulers of Andalus. And Ibn Azur studied medicine with his father Abu al-Azur, at an early from an early age. He fell out of favor. He fell out of favor of he fell out of favor with the Alamo Ravid ruler Ali ibn Yusuf or Ibn Dash Ufin, and fled from Seville. He was, however, apprehended and jailed in Marrakesh in 1140. And later in 1147, when the Almohad dynasty conquered Seville, Ibn Zuhr returned and devoted himself to medical practices. He passed away in Seville in 1162. In around sort of the books and the collaborations that Ibn Zuhr was involved with, the most famous book of Ibn Zuhr was referred to as Kitab al-Taysir and At-Taysir Madawat wa Tadbir, which in translation is relating to therapeutic concerning sort of the therapeutics in around therapeutics, and also was what had a also had a reputation in around in around his works from Europe, and founded on his works in around the Al-Taysir book, which was promptly translated into Hebrew and Latin. The work was printed 8 times in Latin between 1419 and 1554, according to Sarton. All of these editions contain both the Taysir of Ibn Zuhr and the Kulliyat of his contemporary Ibn Rushd. The Generalia, of Ibn Rushd were generally regarded as the counterpart of the Particulariae of Ibn Zuhr. And Ibn Zuhr wrote major books, they were in different duration, different time points of Ibn Zuhr's life, and in around in around um, in around his works around contribution to anatomy and therapeutics. Ibn Zuhr presented an accurate description of the esophageal and stomach cancers, as well as other lesions. The a Jewish physician and philosopher, Maimonides, admired Ibn Zuhr, and describing Ibn Zuhr as unique in his age, and one of the great sages. He often quoted Ibn Zuhr. Maimonides also often quoted Ibn Zuhr in his medical texts. Ibn Zuhr performed various medical procedures on animals before doing them on humans, to know if the surgery would be successful. And the most important contribution in this field was his approach for was his approach in around the experimental methodology in evaluating new or controversial surgical procedures. The role of tracheotomy in the resuscitation of life-threatening suffocation due to upper airway obstruction remained controversial for several centuries. And Ibn Zuhr noticed that early on that tracheotomy was not being carried out on patients who actually or really who really required it. In the first experiment Ibn Zuhr was thought to have made the earliest description basal stones basal stones as medicinal items as well. And Ibn Zuhr resorted to performing postmortems on sheep in the course of his in the course of his clinical research on ulcerating diseases of the lung. And Ibn Zuhr was also an observant pathologist and can and was given the sort of title the father of experimental surgery. And so, in around the sort of practical knowledge and surgical training, an important contribution of Ibn Zuhr to the progress of surgery was his emphasis on practical knowledge and anatomy for surgical trainees. Ibn Zuhr emphasized that there should be adequately supervised or supervision for structured training programs for surgeons to be before allowing them to operate independently. And based on experience, Ibn Zuhr also staged and classified diseases in practical ways relevant to the management and prognoses. Ibn Zuhr also cutting on the bladder stone, cutting on bladder stone, an operation which was made safer by points of technique introduced by his predecessors al-Razi in Baghdad and later on al-Zawahiri in Cordova. And in around sort of the surgical management, Ibn Zuhr enriched surgical medical knowledge by describing many diseases not ever really described before his time, such as for example pericarditis, mediastinal tumors, empyema, meningitis, intracranial thrombophlebitis, inflammation of the ear, pharyngeal and esophageal paralysis, varicose malignancy of the colon and fecal fistula, Peyronie's disease, purpuric skin rash, and scabies. In the management of patients with acute urinary retention due to stone impact in the urethra, Ibn Zuhr, like al-Razi and al-Zawahiri, prescribed several consecutive measures if and wherein if those measures failed, Ibn Zuhr did not hesitate to intervene, following the same urological principle introduced by al-Zawahiri in order to avoid open urethrotomy. However, instead of using particular techniques which have been which was referred to as referred to as al-miqab of al-Zawahiri, Ibn Zuhr devised a new a novel litho technique idea um, complemented and also was novel to the urethrotomy procedure. And so, in summary, Ibn Zuhr believed in prophylaxis against, for example, urinary stone diseases, and reported the importance of management in around particular sort of urological sort of pathologies. And according to Ibn Zuhr, it is not it is not according to Ibn Zuhr as well. He was has been documented that he was an original contributor, and and sort of contributor, and an early sort of novelist in around surgical procedures. And Ibn Zuhr was perhaps was documented and evidenced as one of the greatest in around sort of surgical procedures around and around urology, and sort of and in part of nephrology as well. And he was perhaps one of the great one of the most important sort of clinicians in Islam, in aligned to Islam, after Al-Razi. And furthermore, he was one of the most famous physicians of his time, not only amongst Muslims, but in Christendom, and in his influence upon European medicine, which was maintained until the end of the 17th century. So that draws this audio podcast to a close, and to an end. There will be some information in social media online around sort of the where listeners out there can check out some of the sort of further works around Ibn Zuhr, and other sort of physicians and sort of researchers from the time, from sort of a time or a historical perspective, and and again, the works, there will be some of the citations will be in on social media, will be on social media. So do feel free to check out the information online. And this audio podcast, as is the case with the other with most of the other audio podcasts, in line to Storm Robotics Productions, is available on and across several social media platforms. So thank you for tuning in. This has been an audio podcast aligned to the analysis edition, a part of a Manuscript Cyclone, a part of a Bostic Summit, and it's been an audio podcast aligned to another Storm Robotics production. Thank you for tuning in.